There's a grace where the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of power set me free, there is a grave that holds nobody, power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to Him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may, in the place between, for all the things unseen, I'm just reckoning. I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where He'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness when the darkness bows to Him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls break in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. That's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. You can count on me 'cause I can count on you.
Well, good morning, North Church. It's good to be with you. Hope you enjoyed our little bit of a runaround preparing for church. It's always good to have a bit of a smile or even a little bit of a laugh, and particularly in these times of COVID-19, we need to remember that laughter is a gift from God as well. And so let's look today at what I want to talk about, which is basically priorities, basically those things that drive us in many ways. We're using a story that many of you will be familiar with today about priorities. I just want to say your priorities are the things that take up your thoughts, take up your time, and take up your resources as well. So it's possible to have priorities which are enjoyable, but in the scheme of God's things, are not as important as what Jesus would actually have us to do. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about 3 siblings. Most of you would know they would be probably the 3 most famous siblings in the Bible, even though they're not really in a whole lot of scripture. We know their stories. And so the story is about Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Now, in John chapter 11 and 12, we see this amazing story of Jesus coming into town, of the sisters despairingly before him saying, "Why didn't you come earlier? Our brother Lazarus has passed away, has died." And we thought if you could have come earlier, you could have even healed him in those areas as well. And we see Jesus using the occasion to show the power of God that is in him as well. And so we see him actually raise Lazarus from the dead. So that's a well-known story. But I think a story which is even more well-known comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. And that's looking at Mary and Martha. Lazarus actually is in this story, but Mary and Martha are. And as I said, many of us would know the story as well. So we see just what is important in these very few verses that Jesus shares with Martha and Mary as well. We see that Martha misses out on this deeper, greater chance to have a better relationship with Jesus because she's running around doing a whole bunch of other things, which are her priorities and are pushing her away from Jesus. While we see Mary being there devoted to Jesus, sitting at his feet, listening as he teaches about the kingdom of God. And he actually says, she's done the right thing as well, which is really good. So the sisters' choices have stood out for 2,000 years at what to do and what not to do as well. If I was to ask you a question, what do you want to be remembered for? If you could sit down right now and write out, what do you want to be remembered for in your life? What would actually be on that list? Would it be things that really don't matter, or would it be things that actually matter as well? So today, we're going to be looking at priorities. We're going to be looking at Martha's priorities. We're going to be looking at Mary's priorities, and we're going to be looking at the challenge of our priorities as well. So I just want to read to you from the passage. It's Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, if you have your Bible there. Okay, so it's at the home of Martha and Mary. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So that's a story, as I said, that we know, talking a bit about Martha and Mary in those areas as well. I want to, share with you, early on in my Christianity, when I looked at this passage itself, I thought that you had spiritual and non-spiritual. Now, Mary, who is sitting at the feet of Jesus, staring up at him, maybe in my mind's eye, this amazing awe coming through her eyes, and she's just listening to every single word that Jesus has. And I thought that if that was what it was, to sit at Jesus' feet, to learn and to listen, that would mean you were a spiritual person. But Martha was busy in many other ways. She was running around planning to get the house set up, to get the meal going as well. And so as she was doing those type of, temporal or type of things that were physical, that I thought to myself, well, that doesn't really rate as spirituality. What I realized is that the Bible doesn't teach this duality. We have roles and tasks to perform, just as Martha was doing. But those roles can actually be spiritual when we give them to God and hand them over. We have the challenge before us to spend time with Jesus and to come into his presence, do it through prayer, do it through meditation, do it through listening to other Christians, do it through service in those areas as well. And that is spiritual as well. In the Bible, everything is spiritual. Now, we need to realize in this Middle Eastern culture that Martha and Mary find themselves in, we need to realize in this Middle Eastern culture and this Jewish culture that hospitality wasn't just about hospitality and having people around. It was about doing incredible things and encouraging each other and building your guest up and to serve him in many different ways. It was massive. And it's cultural, as I said, and it was a religious experience as well. So Jews were encouraged to be hospitable to the people that they could be hospitable to as well. So Martha was doing what the expectation of her day was. Her priorities were, in her mind, to prepare a meal for Jesus, to prepare a place for the disciples as well. But she missed out on what God was saying because she was expecting, or her expectations were in what her priorities were, which were messed up, which was to do stuff. She was so busy doing things for Jesus that she actually missed out on spending time with Jesus. Now think about that. She was so busy spending time, or so busy doing things, that she actually missed out on the time to spend with the person that she was doing these things for as well. I often wonder about our situation in the church as Christians. I often wonder about the fact that we get really busy. We start doing a lot of things, and our churches are known for a place of busyness in those areas. But the challenge is you can be in church doing those things and not actually be in contact with the one who is the head of the church in those areas. So we see that Martha was doing wrong things, and Jesus pointed out it in a gentle way, not in a condemning way, but in a gentle way as well. So in her sinfulness over the last 2,000 years, she is known as the one who is worried and upset about many things. I wonder how many of us might have that said about the things we do or the people we are, that they're worried and upset about many things. So today's story, especially in these unprecedented times, is a challenge to look at your priorities and ask, are they leading you to God, or are they leading you away from God? So what does Martha have to teach us as well? Let me start by saying this. Martha was not a bad person. Jesus loved her and she loved Jesus. So she was not a bad person as in showing how terrible she was. She was just showing us that you can sometimes mess it up as well. She was from this Middle Eastern culture. She was, as we said, Jewish, and the role that was assumed for her to do is that she would prepare the house, she would prepare the meal for the guest. And in Jesus's day, it was the woman's responsibility to prepare the great dinner party for Jesus. So her problem wasn't that she was busy. Her problem was that she was worried, and Jesus pointed that out. So he said, you are worried. And here are a few of the worries that she might have actually had. Would she burn the meal? Who would sit where? Would there be enough food? What was Mary's problem? If the disciples were there, how do you entertain that amount of people, especially if there were other hangers on as well? What if Jesus didn't like her meal? So she had these worries, which many of you would have had in terms of preparing a meal for guests coming over to your place. You want it to be the best you can. And so she was worried about all of these things. But as I said, she forgot to think about who it was that she was giving these things as well. What are some of your worries? What are some of the things that pop up for you? Perhaps it's finances. Perhaps it's struggling to pay the bills. Perhaps you even lost some work or lost your job during this COVID-19 times, and you're wondering, how do I pay the mortgage? How do I pay the rent? How do I pay the utilities as well? What are your worries? Perhaps it's family. Perhaps it's a sibling. Perhaps it's a child. Perhaps it's a parent, where you're worried about what's happening for them and what's going on to them, and you're just anxious about it as well. Perhaps it's health. As we've seen the figures go up right around the world of people who have tested positive for COVID-19, we see the figures going up around the world for people who have passed away. I know that some of my fear, even with my family in the States, because the States has had so much higher, infections and scary amount of people who have passed away. You can think about health for others, but also maybe it's health for yourself. It's been hard to get into doctors in many different ways at this time. And so perhaps you've struggled with health in those areas as well. You know, we all are thinking about COVID-19. We're all thinking about what that might do to our country, or what that might impact our own lives within those areas. There's numerous things that you can find yourself worrying about, constantly worrying about as well. Now, those of you who worry a lot, those of you who maybe worry even more than the people around you, you know that worries take the fun out of life. When you're worrying, it's hard to enjoy life. It becomes such a burden upon your shoulders in those ways as well. Worry mixed with anxiety is a horrible thing. So my question is, do your worries cause you to miss out on being close to Jesus? Do they push you away from Jesus? Or can you bring your worries to Jesus through prayer and ask for his help? In Luke 12:25, I'll just read this to you. In Luke 12:25, Jesus said, Can any of you by worrying add a single hour to the span of your life? That's an amazing passage, which we often hear people quote as well. Simple truth of the matter is, no, you can't. And in fact, from a medical point of view, it might end up that you die younger. That's what stress does to you as well. So not only can worry make your life miserable, but it can shorten your life. I wonder in Martha's situation, while she was running around on one side going, I've got to get this done, and she wasn't enjoying the process, I wonder when Jesus gently, lovingly rebuked her, if she went, that's right, what am I doing? I'll sit down here as well. And she experienced that type of thing as well. What are your priorities like? We know in John chapter 10 that Jesus said he had come to give us life and life to the full. Martha was not experiencing life to the full. Martha was being ruled by worry and anxiety as well. So Jesus showed her, and I think he shows us as well, that he actually has come to give us life and life to the full. That doesn't mean everything gets just swept aside and you'll never have to worry about doing stuff in those areas. It's just that if you were so focused on the priorities, you're not focusing on the one who actually can help you in those priorities as well. So what does Mary teach us? Well, it's interesting. I'm going to start by sharing something which might seem a little bit strange. Sorry, ladies, but in Jesus's time, in the Middle East, in Judaism, women were viewed as less than men. Their job was to be in the kitchen, while it was for the men to actually be educated. So it was only the men who actually, and the boys, who actually could be educated in following a rabbi's teaching. And so regularly they would sit at the feet of their teacher and their rabbi, and they would listen. But Jesus flips this ridiculous thing, this ridiculous idea upside down, and it's all over the New Testament. Men are not better than women, and women are not better than men. We are equal in those areas as well. And so Jesus flips that idea that it's not a woman's prerogative or opportunity even to listen to him and to grow with him as well. So we learn from Mary that she is learning from Jesus. And not only is she learning from Jesus, but when it comes to talking about Martha, she is commended for that learning as well. So we can all draw closer to Jesus, even if others want to put us down, even if others want to say you can't do that or you're not good enough. We see that Mary loves Jesus and devotes her life to him and his teaching. I'm sure that Mary had probably been helping Martha at the beginning before everyone arrived. I believe that she probably was helping out with the meal or helping set up. Maybe not as much as Martha would have liked, but she was probably helping in those situations because that's what families do. When people are coming around, you get together and you prepare together. So Jesus was coming to the house. Mary was probably helping out, but as soon as Jesus walked in, wow, where did her focus go? Her focus went straight on to Jesus. And she sat down and she learned from him as well. We see that Mary's devotion is remembered right throughout time. We see that she shows us how to relate to God. It's interesting in John's gospel as well, in the story with Lazarus, that at a meal after, Mary does this incredible thing, which we have for us and to learn from as well. It says that Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and she wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But we know that Judas rebuked this and rebuked her and said, what are you doing? That's like a year's worth of wages. We could have taken that and served the poor and, done ministry and all those things. The simple fact of the matter was Judas didn't care about those things. He was the treasurer. He had the money in his, backpack or in his robe in those areas. And he could see that if he had that, he would have more access to that money for himself and selfishly as well. So it's interesting what happens after that. Jesus basically says, it was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. So Mary's devotion is remembered throughout time. listening to Jesus, loving Jesus, sacrificially giving to Jesus. She teaches us about our priorities. It didn't matter what others thought she should do. And some of you might struggle with the fact that people think or tell you what you should do. It didn't matter what the cultural norms of the day were dictating. She could actually say, no, I want to be with Jesus and learn from him in those areas as well. It might have been her family's, norms, in terms of what they said and did. And Martha did attack Mary very strongly and said, she's not doing anything, Jesus. Make her come and help me in those ways as well. But she didn't do it. She stayed focused on Jesus. She loved Jesus and she put him first. Are we that devoted to him? Are you that devoted to him? Because we need to be, and we should be as well. So I also want to say, what does this all mean in terms of, a little bit more for us as well? Priorities drive your life, and as a Christian, that means your number one priority should be Jesus. It's interesting in COVID-19, ISO, what's been going on as well, to look at priorities. It's funny, it's encouraging to see what habits people are actually doing and getting involved with as well. Over the last couple of months, what have you been doing? What have you been putting into your life? I decided on one of the things I wanted to do was to actually do a bit more study on being a resilient pastor, being on a leader, a resilient leader, to actually last the distance, to make sure that I do what Jesus wants me to do, and that I allow him to equip me that I might do those things as well. And I found that very encouraging and very helpful in my own walk, especially during these times, which are a lot unprecedented as well. I don't want to burn out in the midst of this. I want to be there in the long run as well. Have you ever, or you have done this, maybe you've sat down and said, I'm going to pray more, I'm going to read my Bible more, I'm going to encourage others. We need those priorities, and some have done it, but some of us haven't. We've gotten into priorities that aren't bad, but they just aren't as helpful if we had spent that time with Jesus. It's never too late to get your priorities right. As you know, or many of you know, I had eye surgery right before all of this. I was about 5 weeks where I couldn't do any kind of strenuous workout. And then COVID-19 hit, and I ended up basically just staying in that pattern for a while as well, for a couple of weeks. My only exercise seemed to be as I was, going to the cupboard to hunt down some junk food. But I decided that I was going to change that up. And so I started doing 5 to 8K aerobic walks around my community, up and down hills as well, to get some exercise. And when I got home, I would do some strengthening exercise as well, because I wanted to realize that, I wanted to come out of this healthier and not come out of this in a way where I'm going to have to actually work twice as hard to get rid of some of the bad stuff that's been going on as well. It's interesting, though, I was thinking about that, spending time to develop as a resilient pastor, a resilient follower of Jesus, or doing exercises. Where was my priority? I began to realize that maybe the exercise was more priority over God. So I kept the exercise, but I said, no, I'm going to step up what I need to be doing for God as well. We see Jesus praise Mary for spending time with him. And I want to say to you as well, he wants to say that to you. He wants to say, well done and good and faithful servant, because you are following me as well. So let's get our priorities right. Now I want to finish with this little challenge. I want to challenge you with this. Our society is addicted to busyness. People ask us how we're going, and they ask us, what we're doing, and our response often is that we're busy. We get in groups and almost compete with each other on who's the busiest. And I see that even with pastors that I regularly meet with through a Zoom in those areas. How are you going? Oh, I'm so tired. I've been so busy. And I'm saying the same thing. I'm tired. I've been so busy in those areas. Even with just normal people in North Church, we often talk about that we're very busy on what we're doing. I want to say that God does not want us to live on an unending treadmill. He doesn't want us to be so busy that we forget to spend time with him as well. Our priority is meant to be Jesus first before anything else. And my question is, do you want to be busy, or do you want to be closer to Jesus? Mary and Martha give us some examples of one doing the right thing and one doing the wrong thing. And it's never too late to prioritize what really matters, to say, I am going to read my Bible. I am going to pray. I'm going to encourage each other as well. What are your priorities? Let's just close in prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us. We thank you that you care for us. We thank you that you want to help us with our priorities. Jesus, we pray in these times and in our homes that we would put you first and that we would spend time with you, reading your word, spending time in prayer, encouraging others as well. Lord, we pray that our priorities would be in a list of from right to right to right and not from wrong to wrong to wrong. So help us, as we've already talked about and as we've already asked, help us to be your people and help us to do the right things. Amen.
There's a grace where the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. All my dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding, will power set me free? There is a grave that holds nobody, power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, and I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may, in the place between, for all the things unseen, I'm just reckoning. I know I will never be alone. I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness. When the darkness bows to him, I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between wears thin. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls break in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.